The northern wet season is one of those amazing phenomena which occurs across the top end of Australia every year really, all the way from Broome in the west across to Townsville on the east coast. It impacts communities and especially aviation quite significantly. It really runs from approximately September every year all the way to perhaps as late as March, but is at its most intense really from about November through to February. Each year, many young, inexperienced pilots on their first or second jobs leave the southern states where many young pilots do their training and they head up north looking for work. Many of these pilots arrive up here in the top end with perhaps only 200 or 300 hours under their belt, and they've never really seen a proper wet season before or have had to deal with some of the hazards that the wet season can throw at them. The main one being the thunderstorm and the way that thunderstorms impact on aviation with things like turbulence, heavy rain, hail, lightning strikes, gust fronts and microbursts that can really have a significant impact on safe aviation up here across the top end.
Weather can occur and can increase very quickly in the tropics. So those cumulus clouds can quickly turn into towering cumulus and also then into cumulonimbus, Charlie Bravo, which of course is where our thunderstorms come from, and that can actually occur pretty quickly. Of course, when it comes to the monsoon, those clouds are different again. The monsoon start maybe perhaps late December and then on times through the rest of the wet season. And the monsoon is characterised by just this really long fetch of northwesterly winds that actually come from normally north of the equator. And so there's a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, and that brings weather that is characterised by widespread rainfall, squally showers, and just maybe the odd thunderstorm, but unfortunately the thunderstorms are often embedded within the rain. So the clouds you see with the monsoon do cause some major issues. Huge depth of cloud, all the way up to 40, 50,000 feet. And the cloud bases can be as low regularly as 1,000 feet. And that's often stratus cloud in and amongst nimbostratus as well. So really quite significant cloud. Sometimes those cloud bases in the monsoon can last 500 to 1,000 feet for several days. It depends on the strength and the duration of that monsoon. Now, Hector the convector is an almost daily thunderstorm that forms over the Tiwi Islands to the northwest of Darwin. Because of the size of the Tiwi Islands, we get sea breezes that form from opposite sides of the island, and they collide somewhere in the middle of the Tiwi Islands, and that collision of the sea breeze is enough of a trigger to produce a thunderstorm. And say it happens so regularly, it's almost like a daily occurrence. You can see the storm from Darwin. It generally is quite a large storm. It's not just 10 nautical miles in diameter or a cross section, it's a lot larger than that. I'd always be wary flying to the Tiwis because Hector's bound to make an appearance most days.
So overall tips for flight planning would definitely be to take your time. If you're unfamiliar, make sure you access as much information as you can. Check out the charts, check out the routes, look at what's along your route, terrain, obstacles, airspace, fuel stops and other aerodromes. Once you've done all that, make sure you put a flight plan in, have a SAR time available, monitor Brisbane Centre or Melbourne Centre so that they're always in the background ready to help. Also helps give you good situational awareness. And take your time. If you're getting into a situation that you're not really happy with once you go flying, then don't be afraid to ask for help or turn back to where you came. There's absolutely no shame in that whatsoever, and we can always go and fly another day.
Check their NOTAMs, check the weather, plan for their flight, check they've got enough fuel for the possibility of the wet season and very large deviations, possible aerodrome closures that's associated with the storm season, and options and alternative aerodromes that they can land at. So planning. There is vast areas of restricted airspace that we have as well, so pilots accidentally fly into when they activate because the NOTAMs haven't been checked. And when you add weather to that, it just becomes a very difficult situation where pilots are flying in military airspace with wet weather, so they can't see what's going on, and there are jets, fast jets flying in that airspace.
To prepare for flying in the wet season, it's all about Prior preparation on the ground, but in-flight monitoring, that can take shape in many ways. We as pilots have got all the technology in our hands now, quite literally. EFBs that are throughout the industry, are the standard, so you can see where the weather-related activity is. You can plan ahead, you can look out the window, see and avoid, you can talk to other pilots. There is a multitude of ways now that can keep yourself out of trouble. You just need to know what's ahead and more so what's behind, so you can give yourself a way up.
One thing that pilots could do more of when flying in the wet season is listen out on area frequency so they can hear what's going on around them and ask for help early from us. They would be the biggest messages we have. Talk to us, we're not that scary.
There are a lot of times where we are flying aircraft that are capable of flying IFR. We choose to fly around VFR for many different reasons. And it's not pressing yourself into a corner where you feel that you need to operate VFR for that particular flight. Circumstances may come about where it's in your imperative to upgrade to IFR and fly that aircraft as such, provided that the aircraft is capable of doing so and that you possess the qualifications like an instrument rating. Because at the end of the day, that's going to generate a safer outcome, venturing off into the cloud in that same equipped aircraft at a lower standard.
Rating for IFR in this very large expanse of airspace that has huge storm seasons would be a massive bonus for any pilot. Having the ability to navigate using navigational aids, GPS, the arrivals on RNPs are a huge advantage for them. That would get them out of a lot of very difficult situations they find in the wet season. That's probably the biggest thing I would think pilots would need to get would be an IFR rating up here.
Accidents that have occurred involving wet season operations have unfortunately been quite regular. We see many young inexperienced pilots going into weather perhaps that is beyond their capability or the capability of their aircraft. And unfortunately, a number of these accidents over the last 5, 10, perhaps even 15 or 20 years have resulted in fatalities. And these have been commercial pilots on commercial operations, often with fare-paying passengers.
In the last 10 years, ATSB has recorded 123 weather-related occurrences in the Northern Territory alone. Unfortunately, 3 of those have involved fatal accidents. In 2017, a Cessna 210 was involved in a fatal accident about 22 kilometres to the east of Darwin. Both crew on board were killed as a result of that accident. The ATSB investigation found that the pilot had requested a deviation from their intended flight track left or right by 5 nautical miles. In this particular circumstance, had the pilot have given a wider berth around those thunderstorms of greater than 10 nautical miles, may very well have seen them outside of the influence of the turbulence and powerful conditions that are associated with these tropical storms. Education is definitely the one thing, but also communication would be the second. Talk to their chief pilots, talk to their more experienced pilots about operating in the northern weather areas and to understand exactly what is expected of them from their employer before they head out so that they can then make informed decisions and safe weather-related decisions.
Make sure you've got the adequate charts, the NOTAMs, whether they be paper charts or electronic flight bag, you've got your backups, you've got charging cables and that sort of thing so that everything's going to be available to you. Especially up here, it doesn't take much to get overheated in the sun, not even in the sun, and then you've got nothing. So have all the information available to you. Make sure you read the weather. Make sure you save it. There can be very limited phone reception up here sometimes, so when you go to get it, you can't. And really make sure you've got adequate fuel and keep an accurate fuel log as you're flying along. So once you've done that, you know how much you've got, and if anything changes, you've got your pre-identified fuel stops available to you and you know where you can go and get it. Plenty of aerodromes up here in the top end, but a lot of them don't have services available. So there's only really Jabiru in the centre of the top end, Manningrida are up the top, and then Gove, Tyndall, which is in Katherine, and then Darwin that really have fuel available. So you need to plan, especially in the wet season. You might not be able to go and have as long a legs as you normally would. Typically speaking, we're always going to have inters or tempos up here. So whatever you need for your flying, you're going to need an additional 60 minutes. And even if that's not on the forecast yet, I pretty much advise to carry it because you can be pretty well sure that by the afternoon, there's going to be a tempo on the forecast.
One of the key messages is that not only is it about the pilots being able to understand and decipher their weather to know what it is they're going to encounter along their intended flight route, but also to make appropriate decisions on when it would be time for them to decide to proceed to an alternate, to cancel a flight, or simply just to opt not to go in the first place?
It's hard to say no. You don't want to let anyone down, you don't want to let the passengers down, you don't want to let the boss down, for many different reasons. We as pilots, pride ourselves on getting the job done, but sometimes you do have to say no. The first time you say no is the hardest. It gets easier after that.
In the event you might see some weather that's a bit concerning, either you're unfamiliar with the area or not, the phone number for the Bureau of Met is on the gaff. You can give them a call. They're always there. They're an actual aviation team waiting to speak to you. Give them your details of what you're trying to do, your licence and standard of flying, so they know how to angle it. They'll be able to give you as much extra information as you need.
And we do welcome your phone calls. We often do have the time to talk to you and spend some time giving you a bit of a narrative about the weather. And we don't mind having a good chin wag and a bit of a joke at times as well. So don't feel like that you're imposing on our time, because it's part of the job that we really enjoy and we really welcome. If we've given you a briefing and you get to a destination and it did work out as we had mentioned, or there was some differences there, we do welcome the feedback. That improves our knowledge as well, that to what we forecast to what you're actually seeing when you get there. So look, if you ever need to call us or would like to call us with some feedback, that's always welcome. That's gold for us, yeah.
We certainly want pilots to be aware that safe and efficient operation during the wet season is entirely achievable. But what we want pilots to do is take a little more time, be a little bit more judicious and careful with their risk management, and also to gain an appreciation of the vast amount of resources that are available, both online from other experienced pilots that they can tap into, that they can utilise both before they leave the ground and while they are actually airborne using the various frequencies that are run by Airservices Australia. There's a wealth of information that pilots can use to assist their decision making and to enable them to make better risk-based decisions when they are flying.